Carrie Knott is our grain crop specialist, and I won't tell them that you're a Murphy, but she's not far from home.
Don't be telling all my secrets.
So Carrie's just originally from up the road here, so yeah, she's almost kind of one of us. Almost.
She's not one of us.
Almost. She's closer to being one of you.
I know where she's going.
You're up on that line. So Carrie's going to talk about some research we've been doing and research coming up. Sure. Yeah. There we go. Something like that.
They asked me to talk, and I just took the liberty of talking about whatever the heck I wanted to. So, please, if y'all have questions, let me know, and I'll try to address them as I go. No. There you go. Oh, no. Well, maybe it's a different slide set than I put together. We'll wing it, okay, guys? This is going to be fun. All right, so I think Carrie and Vicki asked me to talk about some of the things that are coming up this year. Okay, so I'm kind of glad that Todd got to go first and break the bad news, right? Which we all knew. We all knew that we're going to have a very challenging year, right? And so I'm going to talk about some things agronomically that can maybe help us mitigate those damages, okay? Mitigate those challenges. And please don't be bored to tears, but a lot of these things are fundamental practices, things we should already be doing. But things the last few years we've had the luxury of maybe not having to worry about quite as much, with the prices a little bit higher, okay? So let's see here. Got a box. Hang on. See if that'll help. All right. So when you think of maximizing profitability, I thought about this for quite a while, and I thought, well, what is the number one thing that I think we need to do to maximize profitability? And I'll tell you mine in a minute. You got to tell me yours first. What's the number one? What's on your number one, top of your list to maximize profitability? Oh, come on.
My number one thing is grow low. Maximum yield I can grow.
Right? What else? Anything else? That's it. Anything
Variety
else?
selection.
That was one of mine. Yeah. And that goes back to yield, right? Anything else?
Very constant to cost.
Cost. Right. So for me, it was a tie. Variety selection, soil fertility. Okay? And in terms of variety selection, Carl's already kind of touched on this, right? You make sure and get some really good hybrids or varieties that have some disease resistance. You don't have to add additional inputs for fungicides in this case, for most diseases, not all. And Carl, I'll let you pick on me. If I say something wrong, please let me know. There's a box that keeps, hang on, let me see what's going on. Let's see if that'll help. All right, so how do y'all choose your varieties? And I'm sure you've all chosen your varieties by now, right? Have you already pre-ordered? Yeah. Most of you have. But how do you choose those? Y'all have to talk. Y'all are Evelyn and Carl. Come on, you gotta talk to me. How do you choose your varieties? What's your number one concern?
Yield's number one.
Number one is yield.
And the second thing I always consider is drought tolerance.
Right. That's it.
And then I go for disease.
Sustainability.
Sustainability. That can go back to disease too. Right? What else? That's it?
How
So
quick will it dry
disease is
down?
last.
How quick will it dry down?
Yeah. Okay? Is it going to be the same for every field you have? Are these priorities, these lists going to be the same?
I try to go with some of your soil types too.
All right. And I think that's important for this coming year. I think it's very important. Okay? So for me, number one is disease. And so I told you, you pick on me, I'm going to pick back. Disease is number one. Disease is number one. Why? Why would you think I'm crazy enough to pick disease number one? I'm not a pathologist.
Cut costs later on.
That's right. Because this is your most economical way make sure that you get the yield you want. Because you're not only going to reduce input costs of the fungicide, labor, fuel, wear and tear on your, getting into the autonomous now too, wear and tear on your equipment, right? So you can really go ahead and capitalize on those disease packages out of your varieties. Now, that's really easy to do, right? And I'm not picking on these companies. Hopefully they're great enough that you can't tell exactly which ones. I'm not picking on anybody. I'm not, any company, but this is really easy to figure out, right? Should we laugh? Yeah. It is not easy. Sometimes, a lot of times, they don't really have full disclosure, I guess is the worst way to put it, to let you know what the resistance is. It's very subjective, right, Carl? I mean, it's a pretty subjective range in terms of tolerances. My biggest gripe is that everybody uses their own scale, right? Sometimes one needs good, sometimes one needs bad. And you've got to know that. You've got to know it for the companies when you're communicating as to what you want, okay? And when you're looking at the literature. It's very important, okay? Again, hopefully I'm not boring you to tears. When we think about priorities, if we're thinking about products have their place. But you need to understand what's going on. Do you have a widespread problem? Is it pockets of problems? Is it fields? You're going to have different disease problems if you're in the bottoms, right? Versus higher ground, better ground. Those humid areas. Do you need some of the seed treatments? What do you think? I'm picking on a Levo here. It's not a bad product if you need it. What is a Levo for? For sudden death. Do y'all need it in every field? Widespread? And what's the cost on that? I don't know, Carl, do you?
I think it's about an additional $13 per unit for the Levo.
So, it'd be worthwhile knowing. Do you need it? Do you not need it? Can control be achieved with management? For sudden death, what's the management practice that you can do to control sudden death? So which way? Plant earlier or later? Later. Right. If you have sudden death in your field, you want to make sure and avoid early plantings. Okay? What about in terms of corn? What about the BT traits? Does everybody grow BT traits, traded corn? Do your neighbors grow BT traded corn? Yeah. 100%? Or is there some that you don't? It's hard to find, right? It's really difficult to find non-traded. But do we need it? That's a question. Do we need it in Kentucky? Sure, it can be useful in some environments, but what about Kentucky? So back in, I'm not sure if it ran, this study ran at 7 years. I don't know if it started in 99 and went through 05 or if it started in 2000 and went to 06. But it was a 7-year study with now the older BT traits. Okay, and we were looking at tunneling. No surprise, with the later planting dates, you have more evidence of these insects, right? More tunneling. What did that do for yield? Well, once you get past the late May planting, there is a little bit of yield difference, right? But it's not statistically different until you get to that late May. And I know y'all really don't care if it's statistical or not. We're talking about 6 bushels. That's a pretty decent increase, right? But that's saying that it's chance. Yeah, it's 6 bushels on average, but by chance you could also have 6 bushels the other way. Okay? So, in terms of this study with the older BT traits, you can really, your take-home message is we really don't need it in Kentucky. All right? So Doug Johnson, his last swan song, I suppose you would say, was revisiting this study. Okay? And so he said, you know what? These newer BT traits, are a lot different than the old ones. They actually called this BT the telephone pole, because I think it was the 3-stack. It had all 3. And he also included a seed treatment plus a BT, so that was kind of the control, the treated control. Then he broke it out. The seed company gave us only the seed treatment, only the BT, and then a control. So this is the same hybrid, and it just has all these treatments, okay? What do you think we found? He planted pretty early, that's pretty late. Non-significant. This is yield. There's no statistical difference between any of these at any of the planting dates. Although, as a producer and agronomist, I would say I'd take the 150 over the 110, right? But where was that with the late planting? So with the late planting, you might be able to capture it. There was so much variation in this small plot that it did not capture any statistical significance. With a early planting, what do you see? With the earliest planting, what do you see in terms of which one had the highest yield? The control. That had nothing. No seed treatment and no BT. Okay? How much money do you think you can save on a non-traded, non-seed treated? You can save some money there, but how hard is that going to be? How hard is that going to be to find? You're really going to have to start early to find those, right? They can be found, guys. They can be found. Okay? Don't laugh at me too hard. So this is just a summary that Doug helped put together. It's unlikely that the BT traits are going to be economical for early and time of planting. Okay? It's the late planting where you can capture your BT differences. In terms of root worms, in Kentucky, rotation is sufficient, and I think most of us, maybe not all, but there is a good level of rotation going on. Exceptions, we always have exceptions as scientists, right? Always, and we're really boring about that, but if you have a known problem, these traits will help you out quite a bit. But I just don't know how economical they're going to be. If we're going to stay in business, we might have to take the time to look for some other options. So I'm not saying change your whole farm, but at least try on some of your acreages, right? So what else? Relative maturities. Who plays with the maturities? Do you plant the same hybrid across your whole operation? You pretty much stagger those out, right? That helps with logistics and also very much insurance. So last year we saw that, especially with the soybeans, right? With the timing of the drought stress last year. Some fields had better yields, some fields did not, correct? It just was a timing of the vegetative growth stage of those plants when the drought stress hit. Yield potential is last on my list, right? Because you really need to make sure that you have the disease resistance and then make sure it has high yielding. And for me, it's just because it's more economical. If you don't have to put those inputs on, those fungicides, whatnot, then you're going to save yourself some money in the long run. But for me, I would always look at your disease package first. And if you can't find that information very well, you need to get to know your seed consultant very well and figure those out, because he knows. Next, for me, again, it's a tie between variety and hybrid selection and adequate fertility rates. Okay? How many of you test, pull soil tests every year? Anybody pull it every year? A few of you. Every 3 years? This might be the year that you might want to try and pull them a little more frequently. At least with soybeans, we're seeing some potassium deficiencies. Don't know what's going on, but even driving around the state, Edwin and I are seeing quite a bit deficiencies, at least this week. It's not really sure what's going on. I mean, it's hard to tell if the recommendations are a little off or if they just haven't been tested. What else can cause nutrient deficiencies? Can look like a nutrient deficiency if the soil is adequate. You have some sort of compaction. Right?
That's one of the biggest problems.
It is a huge problem. It is a huge problem. You may want to get into the field for whatever reason, and you did it 2 years ago and got by with it. But I think compaction, in terms of my opinion as an agronomist, compaction probably steals a lot of yield from Kentucky. And we don't even know it. Okay? So it's hard to say if these nutrient deficiencies we're seeing were a function of any sort of root restrictions or not. But it would be nice to know if that's the case. So I would highly recommend pulling soil tests this year. Make sure you're at adequate levels. Adequate is the key word, adequate levels, okay? So in terms of fertility rates, you know, Edwin and the soils guys talk about this all the time. There's two philosophies, right? There's, you know, nutrient removal philosophy, and then there's the philosophy that the university uses. Now, which one of these has a lower recommendation typically? UK or some other commercial labs? Right. We do. And that doesn't mean they're wrong, but UK's information is based upon decades of research on crop response to these fertility levels. Okay? Decades. 40 years at least on a lot of these crops. Okay? So, in terms of the foliar products that tout, you don't have to put it on the soil, it's cheaper, you just have to run across the ground once and you're fine. I took this is the actual soil test results. Okay, we're talking about the soil test found 234 pounds of K per acre. So AGR 1 says we need to add a little bit. So how much product would we need if we put this on the ground? 67 pounds, right? Okay. There's foliar products that say, oh, you don't have to worry about that, just apply it foliarly, right? Well, if you look at the analysis, you're going to need 70 pounds or 13 pounds or gallons per acre. But the application rate is only 5 to 1, right? So how many times are you going to have to go over that field? So a lot of these foliar products are not rescue treatments, okay? It's a lot cheaper if you just apply it to the soil. What's next in terms of saving input costs? How many of y'all have seen these, I don't know if we can call them new anymore. I think we've been talking about them for about 2 years. Y'all seen these corn seeding rates from Chatter in the last few years? So we're talking about these seeding rates, and we're looking at it in terms of soil productivity. Okay? The higher the productivity, the higher the seeding rate. It's not really rocket science. But I think on some of the marginal ground, even the medium ground, we can cut back on seeding rates and still have just as high yields regardless. In terms of soybeans, our recommendations have been for a long time, I guess about 140, 150. What I wanted to show, and I don't even know if you can see it, is, can you see that top line, the April 2003 seeding date? Let me see. The minimum plant population for optimum yield, that last column, in 2003, it was 40 to 50,000 plants per acre. In that year.
You gotta say something, evenly spaced.
No. I mean, this was Chad's work. He just used some of the equipment we have. I mean, he didn't go out there and make his graduate students poke them in. I mean, well, we do that sometimes. I don't know. I mean, he was using, my understanding, just commercial equipment, you know, like 4-row planters. splitters. Okay, 2004, we went from about 40 to 90, 70, 85, right? And so after he did this study, he went ahead and did a few more years, and I don't even know if you can see this. I can't even see it, to be quite honest. But what he found was that with May planting dates, his highest yield, and that was 70 bushels that year, it didn't matter if you have 50,000 to 225,000, they all yielded 70 bushels per acre. In that year, okay? You go to June, of course you want to bump them up a little bit. In June, the highest he saw was about 125 to 150 on up. But basically, what I'm saying is, at least in soybeans, I think we could cut back on seed costs. Okay? Why do I say that? Well, for 2015, some of the seeding rates we had for the yield contest were pretty high. Okay? Let's see if I have this on there. The state winner, I think, was, it was in the 160. And then for double crop, it was 175. But you can see here that everybody, the double crops, the blue, and this is just number of entries at each seeding rate, okay? And you can see that we have from 230 to 120. Well, that's well above our recommendations, okay? And I think we can save costs. Remember, in 2003, of course, that was probably the perfect year. I wasn't here then, but I'm sure it was the perfect year. It probably had rain every time you needed it. Probably was a nice rain season. But 40,000 plants per acre to maximize your yield for soybeans, that's amazing to me, right?
Weeds and grass really love those low populations.
They do. Yeah, but given the proper year, the soybean will branch out and will compensate, and that's the thing. The soybeans will grow up, bush out, and compensate and will shade eventually. But until you can get that shading, you can have some challenges.
I did a thing for Chad back about that time over in Hopkins County. We did it was later in the year, it was in June when we planted. Couldn't get in there early. The higher populations was actually better at a later year than later in the year. The higher populations are better than the low populations.
They are.
Not significantly, so there is a medium in there. We could probably lower populations, but maybe not extremely low.
No, and for and we say double crop, but it would be late plantings as well. You're going to want to bump it up to 140, 150. I think 150 was typically, the breaking point on the statistics that Chad did, but 140 maybe worked out for the economics, and so that's the recommendation that we have in our extension publications. So again, you have to figure out what's going on in your system. But I still think that even with this, and I know these are contests, this is for a yield contest, but a lot of our yield contest entries are just entries. They don't necessarily, some of these guys don't necessarily put it out into, yield contest areas. I know there is the possibility that some do. But I think some of the guys don't. They just start cutting beans, it looks good, and they have the agent come in, okay? So I just wonder, even if you tried on a small field this year, for a couple of years, just see if you can cut those back. That might help you out in some of your costs. The other thing is, how many of y'all, do y'all worry about your seed germination? Do y'all check that tag? Do you verify that tag yourselves? Some of you do. That can really affect quite a bit, right? So if we have 85% germ, you're only getting about 136 plants per acre, okay? If you have 65, so for me, I think you should spend the time to choose carefully your hybrids, your varieties. And it's not easy. It's not easy at all. I was just going through, we have the winter wheat meeting tomorrow, so I was going through looking at fusarium headlight resistance of certain varieties that I'll talk on again tomorrow. And that was really hard. And I know you guys know this, but it was really difficult to find that information on some of the varieties I was looking for. I know that that's the case, but it's worth spending the time, okay, on that. Adequate fertility is going to be key the next few years, so that that's not going to be restricting your yield. Compaction, I don't have that on here, but compaction as well. I seriously think that's one of our largest yield peaks in Kentucky, and we don't even know it. We don't even know it at the time because there's no symptomology going on. So, and possibly think about seeding rates. Okay, in terms of reducing inputs, like I said, we always have exceptions. For wheat, the exception's going to be fungicides for FHB. We pretty much just need to apply those to make sure we don't have a problem. Sounds like for southern rust too, right? If you start seeing southern rust, you probably need to apply fungicide.
Depends on when.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But it would be worth considering. I'll kind of punt this one to Carl, but I've been getting a lot of questions about foliar fungicides in wheat prior to heading, prior to emphasis. And I would say, in my opinion, most cases they probably aren't worth their input costs. What do you think, Carl?
It's a case-by-case scenario, I would say, and it's important to know what's out there. I don't have any wheat data from Kentucky at the moment, but again, I'll relate to some of my trials across the river, or west at least. In Illinois, they were not really needed for the most part. The head blight timing, which is early flowering, when you're starting to see those anchors come through, is going to give you protection on the flight leaf for a lot of the foliar diseases. The exception would be if you have stripe rust or leaf rust coming in earlier, where you might need to make an application at flag leaf. Or if you just happen to have a lot of septoria or staganospora leaf blotch that's showing up pretty early. But it's important to go out and look and see what's going on. Diseases like septoria and staganospora, the leaf blotch, are going to start at the bottom of the plant and just work its way up. So the flag leaf is the most important leaf to protect. So it really is kind of a timing thing on when diseases start to show up. But my experience west of here is we don't see a big flush of diseases until heading. And if you apply your Rosaro or Carumba at peak 10.51, then that's going to give you pretty good protection on your flag leaf. But I think it's important to know what's going on in your individual field.
When I had a call, and I thought I had lost something in translation, I had a call from a consultant in the state that said, yeah, a producer that wanted to apply fungicide at peak 3. I said, oh, you must be mistaken. You know, he was like, no, this guy heard of the product and he wants to apply it. And I'm trying to get him talked out of it. But they were wanting a fungicide at peak 3 on wheat, which is green. I mean, I can't imagine. I mean, we had no data to support that we needed that. So, I mean, just making sure that I understand that these products do help with some insurance and peace of mind, but, you know, in the coming years, it's going to be very difficult to apply a lot of inputs and stay afloat. So Carrie and the others also asked me to talk about maybe some research that we've got going on, and I just decided to talk about 2 projects. One of them is a controlled drainage project I've been working on. And so what we do is we install tile gates. Are y'all familiar with tile gates? Controlled drainage structure. Basically, you just kind of stop off the end of that drainage pipe to conserve the water in your profile. Okay? And so, of course, when you have saturated conditions like on the left, you're going to have them open so they drain, so that you can get in there and in the spring get planted. Okay? But during this time of the year, in the winter, you have them closed. Okay? And so they're not freely draining this time of year. You'll open them up early enough in the spring to let it dry down to like you plant. Then when you're planted and feel like the risk of any sort of drowning is over, you go ahead and fill them back in to help conserve water. Okay, so it's a way to help irrigate, quote unquote irrigate, or have more water in your system. And what got me interested in this is there's some studies, and specifically the study in Indiana that was done not too long ago said that in corn you can see a 10% yield increase. Okay? I thought, well, that's kind of interesting. So we have quite a bit of drainage in Kentucky, but we don't have a whole lot of access to preventative irrigation, right, in our own state. And so what I did is I found a site, and it's fairly productive soil. It's a belt map once it's drained. And so in 2014, we had about a 12% yield increase. Okay? In 2015, he grew wheat and double crop beans. Of course, for the wheat, we left it open the whole time. We didn't close those tile gates until after we planted the soybeans. And even then, last year, we saw a 13% yield increase last year. And now you have to remember, we closed these off in late June, early July. And we already had, that's when we dried up, right? We didn't have a whole lot of rain at this site for several weeks after planting. It was very dry. I was pretty concerned. I thought, well, this will be the year we see no differences. But we still had a 13% yield increase. Okay? And that's just off a little tile gate. And for these sites, the cost of the tile gate is really the depth that you go. And so these were about $600. They're about 6 to 8 feet. So he could easily pay for these pretty quickly. This coming year, we're going to go back to the corner site, and we'll see what happens. Now, like Carl said, these are 1-2 years data, right? And it's not even replicated, all right? This is just comparing one of those to the next, and we're just looking at yield increases. But I find it to be very promising. And so if any of y'all know the fields or are interested in working with me and Carrie on this, we'd be really excited if we come to your farm and see what's going on. So the last thing I want to talk about, how many of y'all heard of wheat? Much wheat grown? Some? So last year, I worked with some other specialists, kind of worked with Carl while he was still in Illinois to work through this. And we did the statewide wheat monotoxin survey. Do I dare talk about the dawn and monotoxin levels 2 years ago? I'm going to throw something at me? Don't throw anything. But I mean, I'm just as concerned as you guys were. That was a terrible year in terms of monotoxin. And in most cases, we didn't see it coming, right? We had no visual expectations because we didn't really see that much scab in the field. And so what I want to do is start this annual program where we're going to be collecting samples, wheat samples, grain samples. So when you take your grain off to the elevator, by law, you are entitled to half of the grain sample they broke. And so I would encourage you to ask for that half every time, for every term. Okay? And that's for any commodity. What you can do in terms of this wheat survey, you just get us a few grams, and we're going to send it off and have it tested at a different laboratory out of state, okay, in a non-biased party. And then we're just going to keep that, okay? We want that information. If you participate, we'll give that information back to you. And then we just want to know, we just want to keep track. Me as an agronomist, I would like for you to fill out your agronomic data. I want to make sure we're not missing something in terms of if certain agronomic practices may be contributing to higher dawn, okay? That would be the bad thing, right? Or for us to be able to capture it. This year, I don't want producer information. You'll have to pick your own little code. That way I don't know who's missing, okay? I want to be blind on this. And then we'll just send back the results to the county agents and they can get it back to you, okay? But why are we doing this? Again, annual fluctuations, what's going on annually that can contribute to these dawn levels, and what is the economic impact. Last year, we had about 40 samples that provided agronomic information, which was very helpful. However, 1 year with just 40 samples, we can't draw very many conclusions, but I'll just tell you what we found. In terms of where we were, it was a very low year for dawn. Okay, so the vomitoxin levels were very low, except for 2 samples in Union County. Okay, and those one of them was at 2, and one of them exceeded 2. I think it was about 2.5 parts per million on the vomitoxin, and that was surprising because they didn't think they had any dawn in their fields. Okay. In terms of what was reported, so if these were tested and the producer knew by the elevator or whatever what the dawn levels was, there was only about 20 samples that reported any sort of testing, okay? And so the blue is the submission, what the submitter said, was found. And you can see in most cases it was a little bit lower. Some cases it was higher than what was reported. We did have a couple of outliers that did a self-test, and they were very high. But when we got it back from the lab, they were pretty low samples. Okay. So one of the things this tells us, which we already know, is that in terms of sampling, dawn levels is very much a function of the sample. It just takes one scabby kernel to really elevate those dawn levels. So, again, that was the first year. I want to thank everyone who participated. I want to encourage everyone that grows wheat to participate so that we can figure out what's going on. There's something we need to know about. I don't want to say that the elevators are doing anything wrong. It would be nice to have an unbiased opinion of what the dawn levels were. So that's it. There's a little bit more information. I wrote an article. You can find it on the Wheat Science newsletter. I'm also going to talk about this quite a bit more tomorrow. So everybody knows there's the winter wheat meeting tomorrow, right, in Hopkinsville? And it starts at 9. Registration starts at 8:30. I hope that anyone who can attend will come. So, no questions? 14 years? Yes. Learned nothing new, did you, Jeff?